You've seen the headlines, right? I mean, a sudden product recall, maybe a widespread illness, or you see a brand's reputation just crumbling overnight. These food safety crises, they can unfold so incredibly fast, and the impact on consumer trust and a company's standing can be absolutely devastating. Today on the Deep Dive, our mission is really to explore how food manufacturers and maybe even more importantly, importers aren't just, reacting to these crises anymore. They're trying to be proactive, building systems to prevent and manage them. And we're going to dive deep into this powerful, maybe often overlooked tool for resilience, the Foreign Supplier Verification Program. FSVP. It sounds technical, but it's so much more than just a regulatory checkbox, and we're going to show you how it really transforms crisis management.
That's exactly right. Because look, a crisis in the food industry isn't just one single thing. It could be a really widespread foodborne illness outbreak, something from product contamination. Or maybe it's allergen mislabeling that puts consumers at serious risk. We hear a lot about the big recalls, sure, but crises also include things like supply chain interruptions, maybe ingredient shortages, or geopolitical issues cropping up, or even regulatory actions like citations, and sometimes just reputational damage from, a viral social media post. The main goal, really, of good crisis management is having systems in place, systems that let companies respond quickly, communicate transparently, protect public health, and, get operations back on track with minimal disruption.
Okay. Let's unpack that a bit. We talk about crisis management, but it sounds like the real shift, the bigger trend is towards prevention.
Mm-hmm.
So what's the big picture change happening in food safety that makes this kind of preparation so critical now?
Well, what's really fascinating here is the fundamental shift that came with the Food Safety Modernization Act, FSMA. Historically, the focus was often on reacting after problems happened. FSMA completely flipped that script. It put the focus squarely on prevention. And FSVP, it's a cornerstone of that whole preventive approach. It actually mandates that U.S. importers of food have to verify their foreign suppliers, make sure they're producing food that meets U.S. safety standards. So it's not just ticking a box. It's like building this proactive shield, trying to stop issues before they even reach our shores.
Right. So if we connect this to the listener, to you, this shift really matters because, well, first, it means safer food on your plate, hopefully. And second, it means more resilient businesses, which, helps ensure that safe food keeps coming to market consistently. Okay, here's where I think it gets really interesting. It sounds like a compliance program, maybe just more paperwork for importers. But how does something like FSVP actually help when things go wrong? Or even better, like you said, before they go wrong? How does it actually move from being seen as a burden to maybe a business advantage?
Absolutely. And that's the key shift in thinking. Think of FSVP not just as like a safety net, but maybe more like an invisible firewall. It's designed to stop problems right at the source. So first, through supplier verification, it really does significantly reduce the risk of unsafe ingredients even entering the supply chain in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
FSDP requires importers to actively identify potential danger, hazards in their ingredients, things like salmonella or maybe undeclared allergens. And then they have to verify that their foreign suppliers are actually controlling those risks. That might mean on-site audits or rigorous testing or reviewing records. Now, if a crisis does happen, having already done this due diligence, having these supplier controls documented, it can actually limit your liability. And it makes tracing the problem back so much easier. It's that classic ounce of prevention idea.
Okay, so verification first. That makes sense. What's next?
Second, traceability gets profoundly enhanced, and this is mainly through the mandated documentation and just meticulous record keeping. FSVP requires these really detailed records of supplier evaluations, all the verification procedures, any corrective actions taken if something went wrong. Now, this level of documentation, honestly, it's invaluable during a crisis. If a recall hits, you can ideally trace the origin of the problem much faster. You can identify exactly which batches are affected and respond really rapidly. And that minimizes the scope, the cost, and the reputational damage of the whole thing.
Right. Speed is everything in a recall.
Absolutely. And third, it facilitates regulatory compliance in what's always a high-stress situation. During a crisis, regulatory scrutiny always goes way up. The FDA might be conducting an inspection or demanding documents about your recall process. Having a compliant FSVP program already in place, it demonstrates that proactive commitment to safety. And frankly, this can sometimes reduce the severity of enforcement actions or penalties you might face. That's a pretty significant advantage when you're already under pressure.
Okay, so it helps with the regulators too. And you mentioned a fourth point.
Yeah, and finally, and maybe this is the most important long-term effect, FSVP helps build a culture of preventive food safety. It's not designed as a one-time check. It's meant to be an ongoing process that encourages continuous evaluation and improvement of food safety controls right across the entire supply chain. Importers who really embrace this mindset, who integrate it, they're typically just better prepared for crises. Why? Because they're already used to identifying risks and putting preventive strategies in place. It's really about embedding this kind of prevention-first DNA right into the core of the company's operations.
Wow, so it's not just about stopping bad food from getting in, it's actually about building a more robust business overall. That's a connection I hadn't quite grasped so clearly until now. It definitely sounds like a critical safety net. But I can imagine some companies, maybe smaller ones, might see this mainly as an expense until, a crisis actually hits them.
Yeah.
How do you convince them of the ROI, the return on investment, for this proactive approach?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it really gets to the core challenge, doesn't it? The ROI on prevention is often invisible. It's the crisis that didn't happen. But when something does go wrong, the cost of not having these systems, FSVP, traceability, a response plan, well, it can be astronomical. We're talking lost sales, huge recall costs, legal fees, and sometimes irreversible brand damage. So FSVP helps mitigate those potentially catastrophic costs. It's insurance in a way, but it's active insurance.
Okay, that makes sense. So if FSVP is this indispensable safety net, this sort of active insurance,
Yeah.
what else do companies need in their, let's call it, emergency toolkit? Because while FSVP sounds like a cornerstone, you mentioned as part of a larger ecosystem of preparedness, what are the other essential components you should know about if you're thinking about a really strong crisis management plan?
Right. To be truly prepared, a comprehensive crisis plan definitely goes beyond just FSVP, even though FSVP feeds right into it. It really has to start with risk assessment and scenario planning. You need to actually sit down and identify potential crisis scenarios that could realistically impact your specific business. Think about, say, a class I recall due to listeria, that's the most serious kind, where there's a real probability of serious health issues or even death. Or maybe an allergen labeling failure, which is sadly quite common. Or import refusals at the border. Or even just handling negative media from maybe a viral consumer complaint. Then you need to kind of rank these by likelihood and severity and develop detailed contingency plans for each one. What do we do if this happens?
Okay, so planning for the worst, basically. What comes after the planning?
Then you absolutely need a dedicated emergency response team with clearly defined roles. This shouldn't be decided on the fly. It needs to be a cross-functional group. You need people from quality assurance, regulatory affairs, operations, definitely communications, and legal. And everyone needs to know exactly what their responsibilities are when a crisis hits.
And communication seems like it would be key.
Oh, critical. Absolutely critical. So you need internal and external communication protocols. This means having pre-approved message templates and clear procedures. Procedures for notifying regulatory bodies like the FDA, for talking to your customers, your supply chain partners, and importantly, the public. During a crisis, the mantra has to be honest, be swift, and be transparent. That's the only way you maintain trust, or at least begin to rebuild it. It's not just good PR. It's essential for business survival.
Honesty, swiftness, transparency. Got it.
And this ties right back to FSVP. Robust traceability and record management are just paramount. You need systems, reliable systems that can trace ingredients, packaging, finished goods, both upstream back to their origin and downstream to where they were shipped. This includes having immediate, easy access to all your FSVP records for those imported products. That access can dramatically accelerate investigations and help limit the scope of any recall.
Makes sense.
Yes.
Anything else for the toolkit?
Yes, one more really practical thing. Mock recalls and regular training. You can't just have a plan on paper. You need to conduct periodic simulations, run through crisis scenarios, do full mock recalls, maybe even simulate a supplier failing an audit or having a problem. These drills are absolutely vital for testing your systems, finding the weaknesses, and reinforcing employee training. It ensures your team is actually ready to act effectively when it really matters.
It's easy to talk about prevention in theory, all these plans and drills, but maybe we can make it more concrete. What does a breakdown actually look like in the real world? What's a tangible cost when these systems, maybe FSVP, traceability, fail or just aren't there? Any examples that stick out?
Oh, unfortunately, yes. Food recalls are, well, they're a common reality, and the cost of being unprepared is often very, very visible. There are a couple of incidents from recent years that really highlight the importance of this proactive supplier management and having robust systems. Back in 2019, there was a pretty significant outbreak of salmonella linked to imported papayas. It sickened dozens of consumers across the U.S. The investigation afterward, well, it revealed significant deficiencies in the supplier's controls overseas and very poor traceability records on the importer side. This just made containing the outbreak much harder and definitely prolonged the public health risk.
Okay, so poor controls and bad records made it worse.
Exactly. And then more recently, just in 2023, the FDA issued several warning letters to importers specifically for failing to meet FSVP requirements. And the consequence, their products were actually detained at U.S. ports of entry. They couldn't even enter the country for sale. That's a complete immediate block to market access, major financial hit. So in both these situations, you see this common thread, a lack of robust verification of the foreign supplier and inadequate record keeping. And that directly contributed to delays in resolving the crisis, or in the second case, led straight to heightened regulatory enforcement and blocked products. It really raises a question for me. I mean, what stand out to you when you hear about situations like these, the visible consequences?
Yeah, what stands out to me is just how interconnected everything really is. It seems like a failure in one part of the chain, maybe something that seems small, like inconsistent record keeping can just have these massive ripple effect consequences for public health, obviously, but also for the business operations, the company's finances, their reputation. It all links together. It really hammers home that point you made earlier. Crisis management and FSVP compliance within that. It just isn't a check-the-box activity. It really has to be an organizational mindset, doesn't it?
Exactly. That's the perfect way to put it, an organizational mindset. When companies truly integrate programs like FSVP into their broader food safety culture, they gain the tools not just to, survive a crisis, but actually to respond with a degree of confidence and resilience. And this point is especially important, I think, for small and mid-sized companies. They might not have those large internal compliance teams. So in those cases, maybe partnering with food safety consultants or outsourced FSVP experts can provide that necessary added capacity, get the expertise they need to manage these complex supplier relationships, maintain the crucial documentation, and prepare effectively for audits or worse, emergencies. It's really about trying to level the playing field, ensuring food safety isn't just something that really big players can afford to do well.
That's a great point about accessibility for smaller businesses. So, okay, to sort of recap our deep dive today, it seems clear that prioritizing FSVP compliance, seeing it as a central part of your overall crisis management strategy, is just essential now. It helps food importers protect consumers, first and foremost, but it also helps them maintain operational continuity even when challenges inevitably arise. And critically, it helps them meet those FDA requirements. It really is all about being proactive and prepared, isn't it? Rather than just, scrambling to react when disaster finally strikes.
Precisely. And maybe if we connect this back to the bigger picture for everyone listening, just consider how understanding a framework like FSVP, even just knowing it exists, might change the way you think about the safety and the journey of the food that ends up on your own plate. Like, what hidden layers of protection are you maybe more aware of now? And what does that reveal about the complexity and maybe the vulnerabilities of our global food supply chain?
That's a really interesting thought. And maybe as you ponder that, you could also think about what other systems might be in place, perhaps systems you don't usually see that ensure the safety and integrity of other products you consume or rely on every day, even beyond food. Lots to think about there. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.